Hey, how's it going guys? Captain Kuba here, and today I'm finally back with another top 10 video. Even though I love making lists about video game topics, these videos take longer to write and even edit, which is why I don't do them as often. But when I do, I make sure to talk about a topic almost everybody's interested in. Which is why today I'll be ranking the top 10 hardest enemies in the God of War series. Ever since I became a God of War fan in 2005, I heard people say how easy these games were. Which is partly true because these games focus more on the adventure part of the experience rather than the action like the Devil May Cry series. But we can't deny that we've all had nightmares about certain enemies responsible for killing our precious Kratos over and over again. And now I'm gonna make you relive those moments by watching this list. I should clarify that I will not be including bosses in this list, only enemies. That is a list for another day. So with that said, let's begin. At the number 10 spot we have the Centaurs from God of War 3. These types of enemies have been in the God of War series since the start. They've always been fast and agile, making them somewhat difficult to take down. But it wasn't until God of War 3 came out that these guys received a promotion on Olympus. Literally. They went from being regular enemies to captains of small groups of undead legionnaires. And it wasn't just for the looks. These guys actually give orders for their subordinates to attack Kratos with magical waves that travel through the ground. He can even command them to pin Kratos down, taking a huge chunk of health. And even if the undead legionnaires don't succeed in killing Kratos, the Centaur is always ready to attack Kratos with a joystick quicktime event that only God of War pros can deal with. Also, being one of the bigger enemies in the game gives them the benefit of having more health, which results in these battles lasting longer than most. At number 9 we have the Ancients from God of War 2018. I honestly haven't heard that many fans complain about this type of enemy that much, but I have to come clean. The first time I encountered him in Alfheim, I died a few times. Unnormal. The reason this happened is because the Ancients are invulnerable to every attack from the player. Their only weakness is located on their chest, so you have to wait until they're exposed to attack. Now, some other game would make it really obvious what the weak point is, and give them enough time to hit them. But the Ancients only show their weak point to attack the player with even stronger attacks. My favorite of course is the light beam that follows you. You have to dodge and throw your axe at its weak point almost at the same time. This move is the sole reason why Santa Monica gave the player some breathing room behind this huge rock found in the level. Now there is something you can do to speed the process of taking down an Ancient. After he finishes throwing the exploding projectiles, you can collect them and throw them back at him, leaving him vulnerable for a few seconds. But you have to be careful not to get too close, as they also have the ability to blast you away with one of their magic attacks. So if that fails, just equip the Wrath of the Frost Giant rune and focus on that weak point until he falls to his knees. Oh, this is perfect for this guy. Oh, look at this thing. Oh, God. This rune is perfect for these guys. Let me ask you something. Who is stronger than Kratos? Superman? Batman? Goku? Psst, let's not be ridiculous. The obvious answer is 30 more Kratoses. At first I wasn't sure whether to add these guys, since we only see them once during the final fight with Ares. But they also don't behave like a boss battle. They are pretty much a group of undead legionnaires on steroids. I should say that their health bar is not that big. You can even go up to them, press circle and kill them with one hit. Their strength however is found in their numbers. These guys can easily overwhelm the player by using the Blades of Chaos or the Blade of Artemis. There's even one in the distance trying to strike the player down with Zeus's Thunderbolt. Player deaths here include them making you fall off the edge, simply overwhelming you, or them getting to Kratos' wife and child first. The best solution for this fight is to save your magic in the earlier battle with Ares. That way you can spam the Army of Hades or Poseidon's Rage on these vicious enemies, and even that does not guarantee success if you're playing on a harder difficulty. Now it's time to talk about an enemy I myself did not find too difficult, but if I didn't add them to the list, the God of War community would crucify me in the comment section. Of course I'm talking about the Dark Elves. To me they weren't difficult, instead they were really annoying, due to how versatile they were in combat. They have really fast attacks that leave small windows of time for the player to counter. They can also fly away, leaving you looking for them around the level like an idiot. And worst of all, they can blind the player and come out of nowhere with an unblockable attack. Another type of Dark Elf can also summon smaller Dark Elves capable of overwhelming the player in a matter of seconds. It's obvious these enemies were created to put a lot of pressure on the player and encourage them to be quick on their feet, very similar to another enemy I'll be talking about later. Lore-wise, these enemies should be even more difficult in the next game, since they'll be seeking vengeance against Kratos after he gave the light back to the Light Elves. Santa Monica could nerf them, but it would be pretty funny if the opposite happens. Can't wait to read fans complaining about them then. Oh my God of War. It's time to talk about the Cerberus from God of War 3. Much like the clones from God of War 1, this Cerberus only appears once in the Gauntlet section of the game, but he still lacks any characteristics that would make him a boss battle. This is why he has found himself on this list. So what makes this guy so difficult? Well, for starters, he has one of the biggest health bars in the entire series. This is because you're not just fighting a single dog, you are fighting 3, meaning that Kratos has to cut all 3 of his heads, and this can take a really long time. During this time, he will rain fire, pounce on Kratos to attack him up close, and worst of all, he will send his exploding dogs in Kratos' way. I don't think I have to explain why these guys are annoying. But just in case it wasn't obvious, they run up to Kratos and blow up, interrupting your combos and also doing a lot of damage. The game does give you the option to send them back to where they came, but your timing has to be so exact that if you fail, it will just end up blowing up in Kratos' face. But even if you succeed in throwing them back, the damage they do to the Cerberus is not worth it. The best tactic here is to dodge the dogs and spam your magic attacks. For the number 5 entry, I've decided to give this spot to the Revenants. Now I know a lot of you guys are gonna think they should be higher in the list. The reason they find themselves in the number 5 spot is because once you get a hold of them, they die pretty quickly. But boy are they annoying, especially those you find in Niflheim. The main reason God of War fans hate these enemies so much is because they have the ability to disappear whenever the player hits them. The way you get around this annoying mechanic is by stunning them with one of Atreus' arrows. But if you find yourself during one of his cooldowns, brace yourself to deal with their attacks which leave a poisoning or freezing effect. This really adds pressure, especially if you're fighting a large group of enemies. The best way to kill them is by equipping armor that grants faster cooldowns and also using the Talisman of the Realms to get a few more hits in once she's stunned by Atreus' arrows. For the number 4 spot, it could be none other than the Satyrs. When I made the community post for this video, I had read some of the funniest comments when it came to these Satyrs, which means I wasn't the only one who struggled to get past them. The reason these enemies stand out so much is due to their agility. They use their double-edged staff in a number of ways to ruin Kratos' day. For starters, it's really hard to tell what their attack pattern is since they spin around their staff and hit Kratos in what seems to be a random pattern. They can also use their staff to deflect Kratos' attacks, preventing damage-inflicting combos, and surprisingly this applies while they're in the air, as you will only be able to hit them a few times before they find their way back to steady ground. There's been multiple iterations of these enemies throughout the series, but without a doubt the hardest can be found in God of War 3. These guys have all of the previously mentioned abilities, but they can also jump from walls and hook Kratos with their staff and slam him to the ground. This move would be easier to avoid if the player could move the camera around and locate the satyr, but because these games had a fixed camera angle, these attacks became almost impossible to evade. I feel like Santa Monica was aware of their difficulty level since you only have to fight these guys 3 times in the entire game. 2 of those you had to fight with the previously mentioned Cerberus. I still have nightmares about that section in the game. For the number 3 spot, I decided to go with the Wraiths. Once again, these types of enemies have been in the series since the very beginning. Now, I should say that their health bar is not that big. In fact, you can even grab them just like you would an undead legionnaire, meaning that as long as they are in close range, you can kill them pretty easily. But if you give them some distance, they will absolutely destroy you. In God of War 2, they can throw their blades in a boomerang fashion, meaning that if they miss the first time, they will most likely get you during its return. But their most difficult ability by far is when they start chasing Kratos underground with their blades spinning above. While this is happening, there's not much you can do. You just try to keep your distance until they decide to come back up. This move in God of War 3 wasn't a problem because the game gives you the ability to pull them out with the L1 plus circle move, making them a little easier to deal with. So why exactly are they on this list? They sound pretty easy, right? Well, let me tell you about the Wraiths from Ghost of Sparta. While the previously mentioned Wraiths only cut Kratos' heals with their blades, these ones pounce on Kratos to get up close and personal. This attack not only does a lot of damage, but it also feels like it lasts for an eternity. The mistake here is dodging their attack. The roll in Ghost of Sparta and Chains of Olympus feels a little bit slower than the other games, meaning that they will most likely get you regardless. The best you can do is counter their move with L1, but even that fails sometimes as your timing has to be perfect. All in all, I love Ghost of Sparta, but honestly, screw these enemies. Now, as difficult as all of these enemies are, none of them have been broken. The same cannot be said about the TALOS enemies from God of War Ascension. I've seen a few fans comment that all of Ascension's enemies should be on this list due to how annoying they are to fight. While I don't think that's 100% fair, I wholeheartedly believe the Talos enemies deserves to be on this list. In God of War 3, the Talos' main ability was that of being resistant to stagger from Kratos' attacks. God of War Ascension took everything that made fighting this guy fun and threw it out the window by adding 3 new abilities. This Talos can become a Predator missile and chase Kratos' location from high up and descend with the weight of his hammer on top of Kratos. This move is not really difficult as you can simply run away, but if another enemy happens to hit you, the Talos will definitely land on you, causing a lot of damage. Now, on top of being impervious to stagger, this Talos can become impervious to being hit at all, which makes for really boring and tedious moments in which Kratos has to walk around the level until he decides he wants to be hit again. But the most annoying attack this guy has is the one where he slams his hammer on the floor, causing exploding bombs to follow Kratos around. This is a move many bosses do, including Hades. The reason why they don't annoy me as much is because they have a long invisible tail that communicates to the player the move is about to happen. This move is not present during the fight with Talos, resulting in Kratos being caught with his exploding bombs. I know the solution is simply to walk away instead of rolling out, but his tail is so similar to his standard attacks that I'm always dodging out of the way, resulting in this. Oh, I dodged. I messed up. Yep. We finally made it, boys. It's time to talk about the number 1 entry. There's only one enemy in the entire God of War series that gives me anxiety just by thinking about him, and that would be the Cerberus. What? You thought a Cerberus that vomits tiny exploding dogs was bad? Those ones are nothing compared to the ones from God of War 1. Much like the other ones, this Cerberus has a huge health bar and can pounce on Kratos to deal a lot of damage up close. In addition, these ones can also shoot fireballs as projectiles, which can keep Kratos at a distance if you're not careful. But without a doubt, his most annoying ability is breeding smaller Cerberus. This alone would secure the number 1 spot for the Cerberus, since these tiny dogs are one of the most annoying enemies in this series as well. But what really should put fear in your heart is the fact that these dogs can grow to adult size if you leave them alone for too long. And these Cerberus can also breed other smaller Cerberus that can also grow to adult size. You see where I'm going with this, right? If you're not careful, you will have to fight an endless army of Cerberus. And let me just say, if you go into these fights without magic and the rage meter, don't expect to come out alive. I found that the best tactic is to kill all tiny dogs, then attack the big one in the small window he gives the player before he starts puking more Cerberuses. Sure, it will take you a while to kill him, but it will guarantee your safety. Nah, not really. There's no tactic for these guys. Most likely you will have to deal with 50 Cerberus at the same time. So there you have it, guys, my top 10 hardest God of War enemies. I'm sure you disagree with some of my picks, so make sure to leave your top 10 in the comments section below. As always, I want to give a big thanks to all of my members for their monthly support of the channel. People like Elias89, Mohamed Alunami, and Lolo Garcia, to name a few, are the main reason I'm able to improve the channel with things such as a new computer and new games to stream. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I would also like to thank all of my subscribers for liking and sharing my videos. And with that said, thanks for watching, and remember, go forth in the name of Ragnarok.